downward side of the house was still empty, but the shop was being brightened up for the occupation of a milliner and a dressmaker. The people, when I went in to make inquiries, were all strangers to me. They showed, however, no hesitation in giving me Mrs. Oldershaw's address when I asked for it, from which I infer that the little difficulty which forced her to be in hiding in August last is at an end, so far as she is concerned. As for the doctor, the people at the shop either were, or pretended to be, quite unable to tell me what had become of him. I don't know whether it was the sight of the place at Pimlico that sickened me, or whether it was my own perversity, or what. But now that I had got Mrs. Oldershaw's address, I felt as if she was the very last person in the world I wanted to see. I took a cab, and told the man to drive to the street she lived in, and then told him to drive back to the hotel. I hardly know what is the matter with me, unless it is that I am getting very impatient every hour for information about Armadale. When will the future look a little less dark, I wonder? To-morrow is Saturday. Will to-morrow's newspaper lift the veil? November 22nd. Saturday's newspaper has lifted the veil. Words are vain to express the panic of astonishment in which I write. I never once anticipated it. I can't believe it or realize it. Now it has happened. The winds and waves themselves have turned my accomplices. The yacht has floundered at sea, and every soul on board has perished. Here is the account cut out of this morning's newspaper. Disaster at sea. Intelligence has reached the Royal Yacht Squadron and the insurers, which leaves no reasonable doubt, we regret to say, of the total loss, on the 5th of the present month, of the yacht Dorothea, with every soul on board. The particulars are as follows. At daylight, on the morning of the 6th, the Italian brig Speranza, bound from Venice to Marsala for orders, encountered some floating objects off Cape Spartivento, at the southernmost extremity of Italy, which attracted the curiosity of the people of the brig. The previous day had been marked by one of the most severe of the sudden and violent storms peculiar to these southern seas, which has been remembered for years. The Speranza herself having been in danger while the gale lasted, the captain and crew concluded that they were on the traces of a wreck, and a boat was lowered for the purpose of examining the objects in the water. A hen-coop, some broken spars, and fragments of shattered pine were the first evidences discovered of the terrible disaster that had happened. Some of the lighter articles of cabin furniture, wrenched and shattered, were found next. At last a memento of melancholy interest turned up, in the shape of a life-buoy, with a corked bottle attached to it. These latter objects, with the relics of cabin furniture, were brought on board the Speranza. On the buoy the name of the vessel was painted as follows: Dorothea, R.Y.S., meaning Royal Yacht Squadron. The bottle, on being uncorked, contained a sheet of note-paper, on which the following lines were hurriedly traced in pencil: Off Cape Spartivento, 2 days out from Messina, November 5th, 4 p.m., being the hour at which the log of the Italian brig showed the storm to have been at its height. Both our boats are stove in by the sea. The rudder is gone, and we have sprung a leak astern, which is more than we can stop. The Lord help us all. We are sinking. Signed, John Mitchenden, mate. On reaching Marsala, the captain of the brig made his report to the British consul, and left the objects discovered in that gentleman's charge. Inquiry at Messina showed that the ill-fated vessel had arrived there from Naples. At the latter port it was ascertained that the Dorothea had been hired from the owner's agent by an English gentleman, Mr. Armadale of Thorpe Ambrose, Norfolk. Whether Mr. Armadale had any friends on board with him has not been clearly discovered, but there is unhappily no doubt that the ill-fated gentleman himself sailed in the yacht from Naples, and that he was also on board the vessel when she left Messina. Such is the story of the wreck, as the newspaper tells it in the plainest and fewest words. My head is in a whirl. My confusion is so great that I think of 50 different things in trying to think of one. I must wait. A day more or less is of no consequence now. I must wait till I can face my new position, without feeling bewildered by it. November 23rd, 8 in the morning. I rose an hour ago, and saw my way clearly to the first step that I must take under the present circumstances. It is of the utmost importance to me to know what is doing at Thorpe Ambrose, and it would be the height of rashness, while I am quite in the dark in this matter, to venture there myself. The only other alternative is to write to somebody on the spot for news, and the only person I can think to write to is Bashwood. I have just finished the letter. It is headed "Private and Confidential," and signed "Lydia Armadale." There is nothing in it to compromise me, if the old fool is mortally offended by my treatment of him, and if he spitefully shows my letter to other people. But I don't believe he will do this. A man at his age forgives a woman anything, if the woman only encourages him. I have requested him, as a personal favor, to keep our correspondence for the present strictly private. I have hinted that my married life with my deceased husband has not been a happy one, and that I feel the injudiciousness of having married a young man. In the postscript I go further still, and venture boldly on these comforting words: "I can explain, dear Mr. Bashwood, what may have seemed fake and deceitful in my conduct toward you, when you give me a personal opportunity." If he was on the right side of 60, I should feel doubtful of results. But he is on the wrong side of 60, and I believe he will give me my personal opportunity. 10 o'clock. I have been looking over the copy of my marriage certificate, with which I took care to provide myself on the wedding day, and I have discovered, to my inexpressible dismay, an obstacle to my appearance in the character of Armadale's widow, which I now see for the first time. The description of Midwinter, under his own name, which the certificate presents, answers in every important particular to what would have been the description of Armadale of Thorpe Ambrose, if I had really married him. Name and surname, Allan Armadale. Age, 21, instead of 22, which might easily pass for a mistake. Condition, bachelor. Rank or profession, gentleman. Residence at the time of marriage, France Hotel, Darley Street. Father's name and surname, Allan Armadale. Rank or profession of father, gentleman. Every particular, except the year's difference in their two ages, which answers for the one, answers for the other. But suppose, when I produce my copy of the certificate, that some meddlesome lawyer insists on looking at the original register. Midwinter's writing is as different as possible from the writing of his dead friend. The hand in which he has written "Allan Armadale" in the book has not a chance of passing for the hand in which Armadale of Thorpe Ambrose was accustomed to sign his name. Can I move safely in the matter, with such a pitfall as I see here open under my feet? How can I tell? Where can I find an experienced person to inform me? I must shut up my diary and think. 7 o'clock. My prospects have changed since I made my last entry. I have received a warning to be careful in the future, which I shall not neglect; and I have, I believe, succeeded in providing myself with the advice and assistance of which I stand in need. After vainly trying to think of some better person to apply to in the difficulty which embarrassed me, I made a virtue of necessity, and set forth to surprise Mrs. Oldershaw by a visit from her darling Lydia. It is almost needless to add that I determined to sound her carefully, and not to let any secret of importance out of my own possession. A sour and solemn old maid-servant admitted me into the house. When I asked for her mistress, I was reminded with the bitterest emphasis that I had committed the impropriety of calling on a Sunday. Mrs. Oldershaw was at home, solely in consequence of being too unwell to go to church. The servant thought it very unlikely that she would see me. I thought it highly probable, on the contrary, that she would honor me with an interview in her own interests, if I sent my name in as Miss Gwilt. And the event proved that I was right. After being kept waiting some minutes, I was shown into the drawing-room. There sat Mother Jezebel, with the air of a woman resting on the high road to heaven, dressed in a slate-colored gown, with gray mittens on her hands, a severe simple cap on her head,